What are you saying, Batul? I can only see your big finger pointing at me, and that's not a nice thing to do. Just this. I can only see this. You better get all your all chapter leaders inside, but please get your chapter representatives who are outside having tea. They can all walk in with their cups of tea and coffee, or whatever else they're drinking in that cup. Let's get started on time. You don't want to know who the celebrity is. Have all of you been tweeting? Why are you all so quiet? Look at me. If anybody should be tired because of talking, it should be me, none of you. So come on, give me an answer. Have all of you been tweeting? That's better. Thank you. Thank you for walking in with your cups. If it makes you any happier, I've not even had the time to have a cup of coffee and tea. That's just my pitch to get some sympathy. Who was that? So sweet, Siddharth. I really appreciate it. At least somebody out there cares for me. Oh, I'm the celebrity. Navita. Sorry. That's all it takes. You're Vaya. You can't afford after Aman and Ayan. You can't afford anyone else. Not taken a seat, kindly take a seat. In the early 2000s, an article in the Forbes magazine mentioned that the richest, most successful person by the year 2025 has not even been born. And we don't know what will get him or her there. The power of enterprise and innovation is yet to be unleashed. Are we even beginning to burn rubber on it or not is a question I leave for all our distinguished panelists who are here. I welcome Mr. Rishikesh T. Krishnan. Mr. Krishnan is the Director and Professor of Strategic Management at the Indian Institute of Management, Indore in India. We could do better than that. They say if you clap, you're actually... Yeah. So at a CII session just yesterday, Mr. Manish Sisodia said that if you're clapping, you work your heart. So it's a kind of an exercise. I definitely think you guys can do better than that. Well done. His book, published by HarperCollins, titled 8 Steps to Innovation, Going from Jugaad to Excellence, outlines a systematic path for organizations to build innovation capabilities. We have with us Mr. Vipin Sondhi, Chairman, CII National Committee on Capital Goods and Engineering, and also Managing Director and CEO, JCB India Limited. Under his leadership, Mr. Sondhi has led the company's growth journey in India for over the past 18 years. JCB India has established its market leadership in construction and earth-moving equipment industry and has recorded significant growth in brand equity and revenue. Mr. Zubin Irani, Chairman, CII North Region and President, Building and Industrial Systems of United Technology Corporation India Private Limited. Zubin is an alumni of Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and received a bachelor's degree in technology from IIT Kanpur. And it's knowledge from here that has taken him to such great heights in UTC India. To join them, we have Ms. Rajshri Pati, Deputy Chairman, CII Southern Region and Chairman and Managing Director, Rajshri Sugars and Chemicals Limited. Being in the business of sugar production, green power generation, ethanol, agri-biotech, and food products, Mrs. Pati is the founder of IDF, India's first global design platform for innovation in design, and Kama Ayurveda, a pure Ayurvedic cosmetic brand. She was also conferred the Padma Shri in 2013, nominated as the Global Leader for Tomorrow by WEF, which is World Economic Forum at Davos in 1996, and is an Eisenhower Fellow from 2000. To moderate this session, I would like to call upon Mr. Geeta Krishnan. He is the Director of Center for Executive Education at the Indian School of Business. Amongst the various roles he performs, Geeta has also anchored the successful Goldman Sachs Women Entrepreneurship Program at ISB. Welcome all of you and looking forward to an interesting session. Good luck.
Good evening. You talk about innovation, you talk about enterprise, you talk about entrepreneurship. Each one of us has a definition. and then there's an explanation that follows. It's equally the most versatile, the most ill-used, and the most often used in the corporate society today. Sunil Munjal spoke about the need for entrepreneurship as a means of creating jobs, growing the economy. The essence of entrepreneurship springs from innovation because you do not want to start an organization that already exists. By definition, you're starting something new, and that has to have something new. And that, to me, is probably the essence of innovation. And with a distinguished panel like we have today, I don't need to speak much more than that. So let me invite Professor Rishi Krishnan to set the ball rolling.
Yeah, hi, first, good afternoon, and first, it's great to be back with YI. The first time I interacted with an YI group was, I think, almost 10 years ago. So it's wonderful to be in touch with you very frequently. And just a couple of months ago, I also gave a talk to the YI Indore chapter. Anybody from YI Indore here? Good, okay, good to see some of you. And so let me just give you a little bit of perspective on how I look at entrepreneurship and innovation in India today. I think the most important thing about entrepreneurs is that they really transform resources. They are the ones who are actually the wealth creation engine. And therefore, in a capitalist economy, they play a very critical role. In fact, you can't imagine a capitalist economy without successful entrepreneurs. Innovation is something that goes hand in hand with entrepreneurship. As Geeta just mentioned, most entrepreneurs do use innovation in almost everything they do. And again, the key objective of innovation is really to add value, to improve productivity, to essentially get more out of less. That's really what both the entrepreneur and the innovator are trying to do. Perhaps the only difference between the innovator and the entrepreneur is that the innovator might sometimes just stop with the innovation itself, a product or a process or a business model, whereas the entrepreneur often goes on to create an enterprise and to try and execute or implement or scale up the innovation that was created. That's usually a very important part of the whole process, because without the organization behind it, you don't really see the innovation kind of giving the value which you really expect to get out of it. Another important thing about entrepreneurs is that they often work by some form of creative destruction. They actually tear down the old to create the new. And sometimes that's inevitable, because unless you get rid of old designs, old products, old organization forms, you can't really have new things being created. And last but not the least, I think the most important thing about an entrepreneur is the orientation towards creating opportunities or identifying opportunities. Seeing opportunities where most other people might see adversity. That's perhaps one of the most important characteristics of an entrepreneur. Now, if we look back historically at entrepreneurship, you'll see that most people looked at entrepreneurship in terms of some individual traits. People looked at things like achievement motivation. Do you really have this burning desire to do something, to create something? People also looked at whether you were more extrovert than introvert. But increasingly, people are realizing it's not only about traits. It's also about the environment. It's also about how you're schooled, how you're trained. And in fact, today, that's why there's so much focus on entrepreneurship education as well. It is really possible to help people become entrepreneurs. If they have a little bit of the spark, then the kind of programs that Geeta and others have been running can actually help people blossom and grow as entrepreneurs. What is the difference between innovation and entrepreneurship? I gave you some hint about that a couple of minutes ago. But it's interesting, about 2 years ago, I attended a meeting in the Swedish embassy here in Delhi. And somebody there made an interesting comment. They said, the Swedes are good at innovation, but the Indians are good at entrepreneurship. And I think the point they were trying to make was that when it comes to coming up with nice technologies, good design, perhaps that's what the Swedes are good at. But when it comes to looking for opportunities on how to commercialize them, on how to overcome adversity and create enterprises, then that's perhaps what Indians have traditionally been very good at. Now, what we also know from entrepreneurship is that in building this enterprise, it's often not just the skill set of one person. In fact, some of the most successful enterprises have actually been formed by teams. When I think of teams, I immediately think of something like Hewlett Packard, where Dave Packard was the organization and marketing man, Bill Hewlett was the technology guy. Many of you would know that Sony had two similar people, Ibuka, who was the creative genius, and Morita, who was the externally focused marketing guy. Here, much closer home in India, we have a company like Infosys, whereas you look at the 5 or 6 founders, each of them played a key role complementary to the others. So you had Mr. Murthy, who was clearly the public face, the focus on governance. You had somebody like Nandan, who was clearly the marketing person, and so on. So often, even in an entrepreneurial organization, you do need complementary skills to build the organization into finally what it needs to be. That also suggests that not every entrepreneur may be able to take the organization across the life cycle, because certain people may be good at a certain stage in the evolution of the organization, whereas certain others may be good at a different stage in the organization. That's why, for example, all those years back, the board of Apple tried to replace Steve Jobs with Scully because they thought Steve Jobs was too much of a techie and would not be able to take Apple to the next level. Of course, Steve Jobs had the last laugh when he had to come back and turn around the company once again. But that's certainly one kind of thought process which people have, that you need different skills at different stages of the life cycle. Another point I would like to sort of emphasize at this juncture is that entrepreneurship is not only about enterprises. In fact, what I'm increasingly finding is that we need entrepreneurial orientation everywhere. Even in the institute where I'm now the director in IIM Indore, I'm constantly trying to see which of my faculty colleagues have some spark of entrepreneurship in them, so that they can launch a new program or maybe a new project or take on some new initiative which the organization has to take on. So increasingly, therefore, people have realized that entrepreneurial orientation is not something that's required by entrepreneurs alone. In fact, you need a number of people with some entrepreneurial skills in almost any organization. In fact, today in a business school like Harvard Business School, they've made entrepreneurial orientation a compulsory course in the MBA curriculum. And this is not about, let me again repeat, this is not about becoming entrepreneurs. This is about identifying opportunities. This is about scaling things up. This is about taking something end to end so that you actually complete the process. Many of the things that the entrepreneur has to do to be successful. Just briefly, some of the challenges in entrepreneurship and innovation in India today. I think if you just read the newspaper, and particularly if you read any of the economic newspapers in the last few months, the headlines have been full of all these very highly valued e-commerce firms. So one of the challenges in the entrepreneurship domain is that we seem to have these waves or these fads which come up from time to time. So if you are sort of part of that wave, then you don't have any difficulty in raising money and you're the kind of flavor of the season. But if you're not part of that wave, you can sometimes have serious challenges in making your enterprise successful. When I look back, I also feel that perhaps in India, though the entrepreneurs have been successful, the people who have really made a difference are the social entrepreneurs. The social entrepreneurs are the ones who have tried to identify social problems and try to address those with the same entrepreneurial zeal that a successful entrepreneur does. And here I'm thinking of people like Dr. Devi Shetty or the Dr. V, who was the founder of Arvind Eye Hospital, people who have taken on really big social problems and brought that kind of entrepreneurial spirit to solving them. Just to conclude, I think this is a very important juncture for entrepreneurship and innovation in India. Historically, if you look back, you will find that most entrepreneurship in India was driven by people from certain business communities. Maybe from, the Chettiars, from the Marwadis, you know all the traditional business communities. But one big change that's happened in the last 20 years or so is that entrepreneurship is no longer the preserve of those business communities. We have seen a democratization of entrepreneurship where people across the social, cultural, and caste spectrum have become very successful entrepreneurs. Some of you might have read a couple of very good books which came out last year focusing on Dalit entrepreneurs. I mean, Dalits were traditionally not usually in the entrepreneurial business, but you can see that there have been some very successful Dalit entrepreneurs. These are all excellent signs because these show that our country is no longer dependent on certain castes or communities for entrepreneurship, but that it is possible for anyone across the spectrum to really become an entrepreneur. I think the big challenge today is how, from the country's point of view, is how do we increase the breadth and depth of entrepreneurial capabilities? Just going back to the example I gave you earlier of business schools training people in entrepreneurial orientation. How do we create this broader entrepreneurial orientation? The ability to identify opportunities, the ability to take something and execute it end to end, the ability to take responsibility and make sure that value is delivered to a customer. All of these are important skills of the entrepreneur. And the more we see this across the country, whether it be a Sridharan in the Delhi Metro, or whether it be some of the other examples I gave you, I think the better it will be for the country as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Rishi. That gave a broad sweep of entrepreneurship. Thanks for the rich examples. I think that's really made us pause and reflect on how we approach entrepreneurship. Vipin?
Colleagues on the panel, young Indians, good afternoon. When I was asked by Guru to be part of this panel, I did ask him and myself that somebody at my age, what would I possibly impart to bright, talented youth, brimming with energy, and to whom entrepreneurship perhaps comes naturally. Partly also because the Indian state makes us entrepreneurial. And we are forced to innovate, we are forced to improvise, to overcome basic constraints and succeed with what we live. But importantly, as many have said, we need to move from a nation of job seekers to a nation of job providers, and many of you are already that. In this effort, one comes across hundreds and thousands of people, ordinary people, who have a profound impact on us. So I thought I'll share with you my experiences, but not with big names, simple people who've made an impact. My first experience, and I work with a company which makes construction equipment, and world over and also in India, construction equipment is sold to large contractors and large rental companies. Our business model in India is different. Our machines are bought by ordinary folk, simple folk from all walks of life. And that's because only 10% has to be made as part of down payment, and 90% is funded by non-banking financial companies. So I'm going to give the example of Mr. Sibban Singh of Palwal in Haryana, about 40 kilometers from here, who bought his first machine about 20 years ago. Sibban Singh hired a chotu, his boy Friday, called Billu, who would clean the machine, get tea from a nearby dhaba, and do the real odd jobs every day, check the oil, etc., while Sibban Singh operated the machine on small digging jobs that the village contractor would give to him on a daily basis. And he would be paid on an hourly basis with which he would support his family and also take care of the EMIs every month. In 3 years, Sibban Singh was able to repay the entire loan that he had taken, and he bought a second machine. Now he needed 4 operators and 4 chotus to work in the village on a 2-shift operation basis. And Billu, the original chotu, in this period of 3 years, had learned partly on the quiet and partly when Sibban Singh was indisposed to operate the machine. So he was promoted as one of the operators. Sibban Singh now dedicated his time to meeting contractors in neighboring villages seeking business for now his 2 machines. And he assumed the role of a proprietor come salesman. As Sibban Singh bought more machines, in 3 to 4 years now, Billu aspired to become an owner as well. And about 10 years ago, Billu put in his 10% down payment for his first machine. So today, Sibban Singh and his family own 50 machines, and they cost about 20 to 22 lakhs each. And Billu owns 4 machines, complete with their batteries of operators and other chotus. The twinkle in Billu's eyes when he says with pride, कि अब मैं 5वीं machine के बारे में अब मैं सोच रहा हूँ, that's truly, truly heartwarming. And these are simple folk, naturally entrepreneurial, but also truly aspirational. The company has sold over 200,000 machines, and there would be hundreds and thousands, and we've met them, hundreds and thousands of Sibban Singhs and Billus who are there, but we don't talk about them. My second experience was about 2 decades ago. I worked for an MNC that acquired another MNC in India, and for some reason no due diligence was done because the two chairmen seemed to know each other, and for some inexplicable reason I was given the job. And a visit to the site for the first time after the agreement was signed with a small team, left us completely shell-shocked, because the state of the shop floor had 1,500 people, material was strewn all over, people were wondering about seeming not what to do, there was no job for everybody, indiscipline was rampant, quality and productivity were non-existent. But over the next few days, we were fortunate to find one line of 8 to 10 people whose workplace was neat and tidy. So 8 to 10 people in 1,500 people just hovering around. Output was without defects, and they were oblivious of the chaos around them. And further observation helped us notice that one of the members of the line, Ashok, and I remember his name because we spent a lot of time with him, he hummed as he worked, always had a smile on his face, and he seemed to be enjoying his work. And his specific workstation was neat, tidy, and everything was in its place, and there was a place for everything. We understood why. Ashok was blind. Everything had to be in its place, and there had to be a place for everything, because he wouldn't be able to find his tools otherwise. And over the weeks and months that followed, we got to know him better. Ashok had decided at a very young age that he would enjoy what he did consciously, and he would do it diligently. He opened our eyes, as many, we are blessed with natural eyesight, and this was one person who actually opened our eyes, because we take it for granted. And his attitude was absolutely inspirational. And Ashok's line then was actually an island of excellence. This story we took around to the other 1,500 people who had lived with this for a long time but never noticed it. And this factory then started in 3 or 4 years exporting to amongst the most competitive markets in the world, and productivity, everything fell in line just by creating this island of excellence. But every one of those 1,500 people were employed and were used in the transformational process. So it wasn't just one line. It was humbling, it was inspirational. But 2 learnings. First was that Ashok and many others like him, that we have the privilege of working with, have shown that excellence, and the professor spoke about it, can exist in adversity, including when you're differently abled. The second is that should we as entrepreneurs first create islands of excellence and expand that sphere of influence to the rest of the organization, or should it be all in one go? And that's a question that we have to address. The third experience, again, of very, very simple people. And there are many people who make us what we are today. Many of them are visible, but most of them are not so. And it is for these people that we must consciously look out for and pay our gratitude to. We've made a film recently recognizing the man who serves us our daily tea, remembering the likes and dislikes of everybody on the floor on which he operates. We focused on our security guard who stands in the heat and dust and protects the institution. We focused on the Mali. How many of us know the names of our Malis in the institution? Who tends to our garden, making flowers bloom in fairly difficult and harsh environments in Haryana, and that brings grace and elegance to our workplace. We focused on our cook in the canteen, who brings roti and a little bit of our homes onto the table. Each one of them actually shapes us, but too often we take them for granted. But each one of them, when they came onto screen, or when they spoke to the camera first, without a prepared text, their faces lit up and words just seemed to flow. And when the film was completed and they saw themselves on the screen, most of them, in fact all of them, had tears in their eyes. And their contribution, often unnoticed, is critical to our daily well-being. So as a suggestion, perhaps it's very simple. Maybe it's worthwhile making a list of those who help us through our daily life and acknowledge them consciously in living with them with mutual respect and dignity. My final experience, and I'm proud to bring this story to you, is of Jasso Devi. She's a remarkable young lady, all of 20 years old, from rural Rajasthan, who's very busy with her job and breaking every myth about rural Indian women, especially Rajasthan. Known as the Lady Robot for her skill in welding, we do a lot of welding. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Jasodevi in her own words. We've got a short video film.
मैं नागौर के एक छोटे से गांव बोराट से बिलोंग करती हूँ। ये मेरे लिए नहीं, मेरे परिवार के लिए खुशी की बात है कि मुझे जैसी वर्ल्ड क्लास फैमिली के साथ अपना करियर शुरू करने का मौका मिला। मैं मेरे गांव में फर्स्ट लड़की हूँ जिसने अपनी एजुकेशन भी घर से दूर रह के कंप्लीट की और अब मैं JCB कंपनी में काम कर रही हूँ। मेरे एजुकेशन की स्टार्टिंग मेरे छोटे से गाँव में इस स्कूल से हुई है। ये पहले 5th क्लास तक की थी, लेकिन आज 8th क्लास तक बन गई है स्कूल। जब मैं यहाँ पढ़ती थी तो तब मैं बहुत छोटी थी। शायद मैं यहाँ से 4 किलोमीटर आगे पढ़ने के लिए मुझे 4 किलोमीटर दूर जाना पड़ता।
She was a girl from a remote village and the only girl to step out of her village for work of this sort in fabrication industry. And see her perform is really fabulous. She's earned the nickname not only from us but from the people in UK as a lady robot.
पहले फिर बोरावट और मेरे बाद में पड़ी जोधपुर तो बढ़िया पड़ी मतलब कंपनी का माँ नौकरी लगी बहुत बढ़िया लगी।
जैसे भी कंपनी के माँ ना नौकरी लगे ना जब ये जगह खुशी हुआ जसो की नौकरी लगे।
जसो गांव के स्कूल का मारा पढ़ते बट्टे बाद सब लड़के साथ जाते पैदल यार बच्चा 3 साल बाद मैं बेटा जोधपुर 3 साल पढ़ाई की बहुत बढ़िया बेटी पढ़ाई।
JCB कंपनी में मेरी दीदी का जब सिलेक्शन हुआ तो हमें और हमारे घर वालों को बहुत अच्छा लगा और इसे देखकर गांव की और भी लड़कियां पढ़ना चाहती है और आगे बढ़ना चाहती है।
मेरे मम्मी पापा अनपढ़ होते हुए भी मुझे बहुत सपोर्ट किया, जिसके कारण मैं आज इस मुकाम पे पहुंच गई।
We thought we should have ladies and girls on the shop floor, and this is hardcore welding. It's really always been a man's job, so to speak. And now we have 25% of our workforce with ladies. But we thought they'll bring a transformation on our shop floor. But I think the bigger transformation is taking place in the villages. The bigger transformation is that these girls are becoming role models for other girls and especially for their parents to aspire to send their children far away from home to work in what are looked as monstrous factories. So as I wrap up my address, can't help but admire people like Jasodevi, Ashok, Sibban Singh and Billu, and each time they shake us up when we encounter them. We just got to notice them. They've helped push the bar much higher. Just one thought that whenever it couldn't go higher, these are the people who push the bar higher. And boundaries are then broken, just when we believed that these boundaries were unbreakable. And many of them are young people like all of you. And therefore, the importance of programs like the Young Indians, which will transform young people, all of you, into active agents of change. And we must provide the youth with every opportunity to support and realize the dream of Young Indians. We can and we will. Thank you, Kumar and CII, for inviting me here today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vipin. That was, if I may put it slightly differently, a subaltern view of innovation, a view of personal innovation and how that can kind of inspire organizations. Let's continue that journey, Rajshri.
Good afternoon, everybody, my esteemed colleagues on the panel, Kumar Guru for this wonderful opportunity, all the wonderful YIs sitting here. It's a great time always for me to be in the midst of the young Indians. The opportunity that I have had over the last couple of months being chair for Southern Region CII is that I have been able to go into the deepest corners of the southern region, be it either, Vijayawada, Vizag, Tuticorin, Coimbatore, of course, my hometown, Madurai, and every opportunity I get to meet with the young Indians has been an amazing experience for me. In fact, it has been the most fulfilling part of my whole CII journey so far. Why? Why? Because I meet these tremendous young people and the stories are just simply mind-blowing. Many of them are so anonymous. Many of them remain faceless to the outside world, but sometime, perhaps after I'm done with my stint, I would like to actually sit down and compile a book of their stories, because these stories are simply fascinating. Just last week, I heard the story in Coimbatore of this young man who actually was making Hawaii rubber chappals, and this was, barely about 10-15 years ago, and today he's a 1,100 crore company that is, owned by him and his workers. So I said to him, where is your head office? He said, why do I need a head office? I have 100 companies, and when you ask me what the turnover is, I don't know the answer because I haven't totaled up these 100 companies. So I said, why 100 companies? And he said, because every place that I have my small fabrication units, comprised of maybe 10, 20, 50 workers, and each one of them is a stakeholder in that company. So therefore, I have 100 companies. And I said, so, well, you do realize that 1,100 crores is a huge turnover for your business. He said, yes, that's what everybody says. So I said, so do you have a professional setup? And he said, I don't know, everybody says I need a CFO, but I know what the revenue is and what my expenditure is. Why do I need a CFO? I mean, fundamental, basic entrepreneurial wisdom, if you call it that way. So that's all it requires. It requires a bright idea. It requires seizing an opportunity. It requires a nurturing environment and an infrastructure. The reason I started the India Design Forum was precisely for the reason that I felt extremely frustrated that this whole creative thinking and thinking out of the box in India has ceased to exist, because post-independent India really went into the structured syllabi where we either made our young people study medicine, law, or engineering, and nothing else seemed to have any or command any respect in the larger society or even give them jobs. So that tradition continues even now. If I go around my office and I ask my employees, so what is your son or daughter studying for? Well, they're actually interested in biotechnology, but we want them to get an IT seat. I said, but why? Oh, because they can go to Infosys. How much does Infosys offer you? 40,000 rupees startup salary. And do you care what happens to them afterwards, that they're just sitting like robots in front of a screen and all their creative ideas are just doomed never to see the light of day? And I try to talk to them to understand that in every Indian, there is a spark of entrepreneurship. And again, why? Because we've learned to innovate, to survive on very little, because we've had very little. We've always been a nation and a society that has been either deprived or starved or just stressed for funding. And therefore, it was very, very important that at the India Design Forum, we actually identified brilliant minds, brilliant creative minds that passed out of IIMs, of IITs, of the NIDs, and so on, and actually traced their journey to see where they were at this point in their lives. And much to my dismay, many of the creative minds were away and out of India because they were able to find that nurturing infrastructure that I earlier referred to in other countries like the Netherlands, the UK, and America, of course. And they became big stars in whatever they were doing. And take examples of even great, furniture designers, Satyendra Pakale from IIM Bombay. And Satyendra is a well-known furniture designer, designs for the largest houses of furniture like Poltrana Frau and so on. Many of the design companies that you all use are aware of, and yet nobody knows of Satyendra in India. So we identify people and ask them there, what is it they all want to come back. There are people here, everyone wants to come back to India because in India you can actually touch lives. You can create palpable change. And to me, being in the agri-business, sugar for me if not for it being 98% politics and 2% actually about the sugar business itself, I wish it was the other way around, would be so fulfilling. And this is the reason I actually persist in doing that business, because I know that we have had the opportunity to actually transform the lives of 100,000 farmers. And I can sleep easy at night when I think that these lives have been touched and the quality of the lives have gone up. When we first arrived in the most backward district of Tamil Nadu, there was nothing but sticks and stones and poverty and alcoholism. Today, 20 years later, every one of them has a savings account. The women are working, the women are happy, their families remain together. The children have seen that it's important, the families have seen that it's important to send their children to schools. So I think in India, the opportunities are tremendous, and entrepreneurship requires two very important things. The idea first. And I remember going to a lecture by Thomas Friedman a few years ago and on The World is Flat. And he said, the moment you have an idea, please realize, be aware that somebody right across the world is also having the same idea. So if you don't put that idea into motion, if you don't action on your idea, it becomes somebody else's idea and you lose the first mover advantage. So I think the time there's no better time in India as there is now. India presents herself with the most vast opportunities, and nowhere else in the world are these opportunities available as in India, where infrastructure, the country is opened up. And I was just commenting that, again, in the last few weeks, I've seen the visits of several chief ministers coming down to the industry, selling their state and what they can do. And I think this is fantastic. All of you have time on your hands. If you have the ideas, go for it. The other detrimental aspect to entrepreneurship is this fear, this society, Indian society is gripped by fear and by insecurity. And we are so afraid to fail. Why is it we're so afraid to fail? It's all right. And I keep speaking about this to parents as well. I said, why, oh my God, I want my son to go and join, be a professional because, his salary is good and he can come back and there's no risk. Because if he goes and earns a salary, well, he might lose everything. Why do we have this, this fear of failure and the fear of the insecurities that grip us, in our own homes, in our larger societies? Please remove fear out of your system. It's okay to fail. Every entrepreneur that is somebody in the world today has had a several list of failures. So be afraid to think out of the box. Be confident in yourself, and then you will attract people who will believe in you and who trust in you. India is no more that kind of society that is close to ideas. You have so many people amongst your midst who are private equity angel investors who are looking for ideas. I mean, I can give you so many examples. Look at the new businesses that have become billion-dollar businesses. Look at, Cavan Care's naturals business being taken over. I mean, I can just name so many of these small businesses and startups that have become tremendous. And these are all started by people who came from Harvard or from, Stanford or any big schools. They came because a single person had this dream, and the dream was a fearless dream, and he just wanted to do it to prove something to himself. And so please believe in yourself, and I think you're in the right country. So thank you very much, and believe in Jugaad. And read Rishi's book on Jugaad. We are such a society that always find an innovative fix. And before I end, for me, the example of India sending, the mission to Mars, in its very first attempt, the first Asian country to do that, in its very first attempt, and spending $74 million when I think some American NASA spent $671. and we've been a huge success. And why did we become a success? Because our scientists, those guys who work day in and day out, you know, with frugal engineering means, with whatever they had, with low-cost funding, we managed to put that Mangalyaan project into orbit. So, like our Prime Minister said, this is a shining example of what this nation can do. So with that, congratulations to all the YIs for all the achievements they do, and lots of good luck for the future. And thanks, Kumar, for this opportunity again. Thank you.
Thanks, Rashri. I was just wondering whether we're going to do a discussion on innovation without mentioning Jugaad. It would probably be the first time in India in the last 10 years. But thanks for bringing that up. Zubin, can we round that up?
Thank you. Distinguished guests on the dais, our young YI members. It's great to be here. I like coming here because I feel young when I'm with young Indians. But then today I met my friend Devjit, who was my classmate from high school, and now I feel old again. Sorry, Devjit. I think he's somewhere here in the crowd. But it's really pleasure, being with all of you. My company, United Technologies, we manufacture building systems, solutions, lifts, elevators, air conditioners, fire security systems, and we are in the aerospace segment. And we've been over here for over 100 years in India. We have, over 7,000 employees. And what I wanted to do was to share a little bit about, my personal journey and try and relate it to what, could be interesting to you all as you go about, your journey moving forward. Today, what excites us the most when it comes to India in my business is urbanization, right? We know that there's going to be 250 to 300 million people that are going to move from villages to cities by 2030. I think a lot was talked about rural India, but frankly, we see a lot of opportunity in urban India as well as this population moves. We know that 2/3 of the buildings are going to be built, still have to be built by 2030. That is great opportunity for us, not because of the sheer amount of work that's involved, but we have the chance to do it right? And that's why you have things like smart cities, sustainable infrastructure that's coming. But I think I'd be foolish to say, that it's large companies like ours that are only going to sort of drive this change moving forward. As I look through the businesses, and in fact some of the examples that Vipin shared also hit home to me. A lot of our business is influenced by small businesses, whether it's our dealers, whether it's small entrepreneurs that are setting up businesses where we sell products, whether it's our suppliers. And so entrepreneurship has to run within a large company as well. Doesn't only apply to setting up a small company. And to that point, if you look at small and medium enterprises in India today, SMEs employ 100 million people. They account for 40% of our GDP. So if you're looking at modern India that's going to be built, it has to be built on the back of small and medium enterprise, not the large enterprise that we normally talk about. And this is coming from me, where I run a large company. In terms of opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation, there are plenty, and I won't get into it. But into all the areas. But one area where I see a lot of opportunity in my segment, for those who may be interested, is actually around the area of technology, where if you look at it, data is becoming a lot more available, right? Sensor technology is coming down. So when it comes to buildings, for us, there's a lot more information that's available today because sensors are everywhere, whether it's cameras, access control systems. Cost of storing data is less, cost of transporting data is less, data analytics is less, and that creates great opportunities to provide solutions where we can deliver energy efficiency or faster transport through a building, etc. And I see a lot of small players that are coming into this space because it's not capital intensive, it's more knowledge intensive, just something for you to think about. And the other area where I see a lot of opportunity is in manufacturing. We've talked about Make in India. And we talk about big investment coming in. But the reality is, big investment cannot be sustainable if we don't have an ecosystem of suppliers and small to medium entrepreneurs. My experience today is when we've localized products in India, we're importing still 60% of the components, 70% of the components. That's not going to be sustainable. So for anyone who's thinking of a career in manufacturing, I'd highly encourage you in many verticals. There is a lot of opportunity to start up businesses as entrepreneurs. And from what I can see, state governments, because I also chaired CI in the northern region, are becoming a lot more aware about this. We see, whether it's the labor laws in Rajasthan, whether it's, Punjab setting up a single window system, it's going to become easier. I am confident for, entrepreneurs to set up companies in the manufacturing sector in India. And finally, I'd like to talk about 3 sort of challenges or enablers, when it comes to entrepreneurship or innovation. The first is, I met actually yesterday with Dr. Hande, Harish Hande, who I think a lot of people know, who's really, used renewable technology, to really solve social problems. And one thing he hit home to me, he said that hit home to me was, he said, the first thing is you have to define the problem right when you're looking at, building a business and you're looking at becoming an entrepreneur. And he gave me an example. He said, he spent 1 year, 1.5 years living in villages in India, and through that he learned that, a problem came up where women were complaining that, their saris were wet and they were not drying. As a result, they were smelling. As a result, their husbands were cheating on them. So the symptom was their husbands were cheating on them. The problem was they were not able to dry their saris. And he said, because he lived there, he understood it. They were able to come up with a sustainable, obviously cost-effective technology where they were able to dry the saris through, basically burning, some material and letting smoke go up. I won't get into the details of the contraption. But his point was, you have to immerse yourself in the system. You have to define the problem correctly. The second is, I think one of the challenges we face is the ecosystem in India. I studied at MIT, and one thing I realized, I did my thesis in 3D printing. One, if you look at all the innovations that have come up in the US, it is basically through the university system. There are a lot of companies, around universities. That's where a lot of ideas get exchanged. It's not in, standalone large companies where breakthrough innovation happens. And that is I think a system that we need to build more in India. And so I'd encourage you all, if you're looking at, setting up businesses, I know that there are now a lot of good educational institutes that are looking, to sort of collaborate, have incubators, etc. These environment can, this kind of environment obviously can be very helpful. And I think the third one is around sharing of ideas. I don't think, innovation is going to be breakthrough. Most of the innovation is going to be about taking existing technologies and, bolting on and customizing it for certain applications. And for that, we have to be able to share and distribute ideas. The ecosystem helps, but I think, finding ways where you can, collaborate with others, share ideas will certainly help as well. We started an exercise in our company where we have, taking ideas from employees to solve business problems. And I'll tell you, employees are coming up with ideas that we as management could never, ever even dream about, right? So I think those are just some examples I wanted to share with you as you launch your careers and journeys. And I wish you all the best and look forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Zubin. So we've had a few stories, we've had a few interesting explorations of innovation from different perspectives. I have a couple of questions, but I'll probably save my questions for later on. If the audience has any questions, we'll be happy to go around. Yeah.
I think the question is generally to the panel, but anybody can take a pick. The whole ecosystem of startups in this country is leaning more towards the IT sector and technology-based companies, whereas, as Zubin pointed out, there is innovation happening at grassroots level. Professor, you pointed out it's happening in Jugaad. They don't have access to these kind of startup funding, startup ecosystem. Because you go to any angel funding today, the first question is, are you in technology or are you not in technology? Or are you in IT or not in IT? How can we change this mindset or change this scenario in this country? Because it's actually driven more towards deterring people from getting into entrepreneurship, because they see these companies with maverick ideas getting huge amount of funding, and then they have these maverick ideas, but when they don't get that kind of funding because you're non-technology, you're shattering people's dreams. Thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think one bright spark we can see is the government is planning to set up this new 10,000 crore startup fund. Of course, we still don't know the details of how they're going to manage it, but I'm sure that will be sector agnostic. I'm sure it's not going to be focused only on tech startups, particularly because I'm sure they're going to dovetail it with Make in India and other initiatives. So that's one hope. The second is, of course, there are a lot of the incubators are also, at least the ones in colleges, are also generally sector agnostic, except that, of course, the students generally tend to gravitate towards the new technology areas. So that may not quite solve the problem. But I think it's a genuine problem, and there's no clear answer at this point.
I just want to reply to his question. If you look at Indian Angel Network and even in the global venture capitalist angel investor sector, there is a particular vertical called social entrepreneurship, where they look at solving social problems, which I don't think are particularly technology related. So it's happening today. So it's not about hope, it's happening right now. So you just have to innovate.
Sorry, can I take that first? Thank you. My question is not particularly directed to anyone. It's more about providing an equal platform. So the way I see it, and I've said it in the past, I think a farmer is also an entrepreneur because he's making something and he's selling it at a profit and he's creating value. So is the government at the state level, at a national level, recognizing the farmer as an entrepreneur and giving him the due platform? On the other side, from a perspective of a parent, we as parents, are we encouraging our children? It's similar to what Rajshri said. There's a TED talk by this gentleman called Cameron Herald. I don't know how many of you have seen that. It's on entrepreneurship. And he said that in the US, his parents would never give him pocket money because that would mean that, okay, you've got X amount of dollars and you have to manage in that. He said my pocket money was linked to the tasks I did. So if I gave anybody a massage, I got $10. If I cleaned up my room, I got XYZ. So my revenue for my month was determined by the tasks I did. So, at both the levels, at the levels of that of a parent and at the level of a farmer, are there adequate measures out there to recognize and foster entrepreneurship? If yes, then I'd like to know about them. If no, then what are we doing about it? And this question is for Rajshri, if she could take it, and Zubin, or maybe anybody would like to take it, actually.
Well, when it comes to the farmers, I don't think there are any special funds allocated by the government for farmer entrepreneurships. However, large companies like ITC have created entrepreneur models within their farmer suppliers. So have we, So we've created 100 farmer entrepreneurs. So your question is, does the government create any entrepreneurs in the rural sector? No, they don't. I think it's really up to the companies to do that, either as a CSR activity or as a profit-sharing activity.
I just have something to add on the farmer point. Not sure about your second question because I'm not a model parent, but the first one, in terms of farmers, so in CI, I had a very enlightening experience. Every 2 years, we hold a event called Agrotech. Okay, it is where we showcase the latest in agricultural technology. This time we had it in Chandigarh in November. We had close to, if I get the number correct, over 50,000 farmers attend. And, for me, going to some of the sessions where, they were talking about new business models, new technologies, was just eye-opening, right? Because one, you get to understand how intelligent, right, they are actually. They pick up, new business models, new ideas very, very quickly. And there is a lot happening in terms of obviously dissemination of technology. I just give you one example, through what we're trying to do at CII, but I'm sure there's many other organizations that are working. So I think there's a lot more happening than one would sort of realize, right, and think about over there.
Just a couple of months ago, I spent a day with one of my former students. One wouldn't expect MBAs from IIMs to be going into farming. But there's this guy who's just outside Indore. He is now doing pomegranate cultivation on 400 acres. Amazing, because he's put his heart and soul now into understanding everything there is to be understood about pomegranates. He's just doing a wonderful job. It was a real eye-opener to see that.
Join the chorus on farming. There are pockets where transformation is taking place, whether it's drip irrigation or there are other aspects. We don't write about it enough. We don't talk about it enough, and I think that's part of the duty to bring these examples out in the open.
We have time for just the one last question.
Sir, my name is Debojit, and when we talk about angel investors and incubators and stuff, let's look at the grassroots. It's my thought that if you see an idea yourself, if a company sees an idea yourself, the level of funding at the grassroots is not large. It could be 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 1 lakh. Personally, I have actually helped out few people on their business ideas, and the flip side is I make money out of it, he makes money out of it. So why not? Means we are always concerned about many, many zeros. But what we need to realize is most of these ideas do not need so many zeros.
Okay, maybe just the one last, I can see a hand there.
Hi everyone. It's not a question, it's basically a comment. I think everybody has been talking about new companies establishing with innovation and enterprise. What I believe is not everybody can start a new company. It is more about intrapreneurship than entrepreneurship. Because everybody who has been working in the company, they have to feel that they are part of the system and they are accountable for whatever they are doing. And they should also have those kind of sleepless nights which new entrepreneurs get. So, human transformation, I think, makes more of sense because it's more about mindset. We can actually bring a lot of technological innovations in the company, but if the people are not willing to take them, they'll go in vain. So I think it's all the more required to make the attitudinal change, and then development of intrapreneurial abilities within the company. What is your take on that, I guess?
I think I mentioned that in my remarks at the beginning itself. I completely agree with you. I think you need entrepreneurial skills within companies, in different functions, in different jobs, because given all the changes and uncertainty, you need entrepreneurship across the organization. You can't just be depending on some few entrepreneurial people at the top.
So the companies which are actually, the owners of the companies, how can they actually percolate that down the order within their organization, within their employees, that entrepreneurial abilities? How can they actually percolate it down the order? That is one of the.
No, just got to listen to your employees. It's very simple.
I think brevity is the soul of wit. That's the most brilliant way we can close a session. Panelists, thank you so much for their wonderful inputs, and audience, thanks for the questions.